Welcome to Conversations. I'm Muqtadar Khan, your host, and today I'm going to talk to you about United Arab Emirates' decision to leave OPEC, and want to basically explore what the geopolitical ramifications of that major decision is, and that is the question that I really want to ask. I mean, prima facie, it is clearly going to fragment Arab unity. It is going to also basically fragment GCC. But what else is happening behind the scenes, and what are the potential ramifications for United Arab Emirates and the region in terms of the order that we expect will emerge after the end of the war with Iran, if there is an end. Or by the end of war, we mean not essentially a ceasefire that is default end to the war, but one where there is some kind of a negotiated end to the war and all parties come to some sort of an agreement. And what will that agreement be, and how does UAE's weakening of OPEC and by default Saudi Arabia impact on that potential discussion? And I must point out that as discussions have now focused on United Arab Emirates foreign policy, there is a lot of interesting things emerging. For example, there are those analysts who argue that one of the reasons why UAE told Pakistan to essentially reimburse the $3.5 billion that UAE had deposited in Pakistani banks in order that Pakistan could have certain foreign exchange reserves to meet IMF conditions for IMF bailouts. Some of the proxies of UAE are suggesting that that was as a punishment for Pakistan for essentially playing such an important role in the mediation, because UAE didn't want this war to end. United Arab Emirates wants essentially what Israel wants, which is to basically demolish Iran as much as possible. I mean, they would want to see a regime change in Iran, but they are quite unhappy that Donald Trump has stopped the war and is not punishing Iran as much as UAE would like to. Also, I guess the UAE has suffered significantly at Iran's hands in this war, and they would have probably wanted naturally to see more damage done to Iran. But this decision essentially is being couched as strategic autonomy. UAE finds itself a member of a cartel, which is by proxy led indirectly by Saudi Arabia. OPEC was one of the institutions or instruments through which Saudi Arabia basically established its hegemony in the Gulf countries, and not only that, but indirectly controlled both the supply of oil as well as the cost or the price of oil. If you remember, in my initial reaction to the news that UAE was going to leave OPEC, I had prepared this particular slide for you to look at it. And according to this, OPEC provides about 36 to 40% of the global oil supply, and of which about 4.4% of OPEC's of the global oil supply comes from UAE. So in that sense, while UAE is the third biggest producer of oil inside the OPEC, it is not really a major supplier of that of the world, so to speak. Just about 3.5%. And that is a deficit for, if UAE was not in the market, for example, for Russia, which is about 12%, and Saudi Arabia, which provides 12%, the United States, which is actually the number one producer of oil with 16% of the global production, these countries could just ramp up very easily to make up for whatever UAE does provide. But the UAE is saying that the reason why it's leaving OPEC is because it wants more strategic autonomy. It feels constrained. It has invested heavily. So it has a quota of 3.5 million barrels per day. That is the amount of oil it produces. But it has invested more in its oil infrastructure and now has a capacity of nearly 5 million barrels per day. and that would increase its production by 30%. Its revenues are around $120 billion, depending upon the price of oil at that point. So they feel that essentially they will make anywhere between $40 to $50 billion extra per year if they were to leave OPEC and not be constrained by the pricing and production limits that OPEC imposes on the global market. But you must understand this, that there is a very clear relationship between supply and demand. So if UAE were to leave OPEC and increase its supply of oil, I'm not very sure that other countries are going to reduce their production in order to maintain the price of oil by keeping the total oil production at the same level. So if UAE produces a million and a half barrels extra every day, it's going to glut the market to some extent. It'll be about 1.5% of the global oil production, and it will bring down the price definitely. So what UAE gains by selling more oil, it will probably lose some of it because the price of that oil will go down. So I don't think the gains will be as much as we are theoretically posing. The point that I'm trying to make is that it is not an economic decision. It's not about OPEC quotas. I think that just the fact that UAE cannot get whatever it wants in OPEC must be rankling them, and it must be irritating them that the Saudis get to dictate what other countries in the region do. But I think that there is something bigger. It is a grand strategic shift. UAE is making some fundamental changes in its foreign policy, and which is going to impact Arab unity, Gulf unity, the balance of power in the Gulf as well as in the rest of the world. So I think this is what is happening, that UAE sees itself as a major power and a peer competitor of Saudi Arabia. And I will do a comparison between the two of them, and we can explore whether they are peer competitors or not. But it sees itself as a peer competitor and wants to have as much influence on the regional affairs as Saudi Arabia does. But the issue is that by fragmenting GCC at a time when people thought that GCC will come together because they have all been attacked by Iran, even Oman was attacked by Iran. Which Oman was seen as one of the most sympathetic states. Oman and Qatar were the most friendliest to Iran, and even they were attacked. Especially Qatar has suffered significantly. Its infrastructure has been hit very hard by Iranian attacks. So the assumption was until recently that the Gulf countries had a lot more reasons to come together, to have joint protections, to basically come up with a military plan, a military cooperation plan, which will ensure that they are better protected and not just rely on the United States or some other foreign country to come and protect them, but to become more self-reliant through mutual support and cooperation. So the assumption was that soon GCC will get its act together. They will come up with some sort of a joint command to protect themselves from Iran's future aggression, because no matter what, Donald Trump has by default made Iran a more powerful state. Even though it has damaged much of its military capabilities, Iran is coming out as a much powerful state in the Persian Gulf, far more than it was prior to the war, where it tried to dominate the region through its proxies. But now Iran is directly being far more influential, not just in the region, but also in the global economy. And the fact that the region is fragmenting rather than uniting against it also suggests that it has been far more successful in ensuring that a common opposition does not arise to itself. So instead of GCC coming together to come up with a joint plan to deter Iran or to combat Iran or defend themselves from Iran, they are breaking away. Now, what does this breaking away do? We will do another show some other time in which we will talk about how these countries are breaking away, because there isn't a common pattern. Each country seems to be having its own way. For example, Saudi Arabia has a back channel discussions and with Iran itself. It is trying to mend its relations with Iran, even though it has allowed its bases to be used by U.S. and Israel to attack Iran, and Iran has retaliated very aggressively against Saudi Arabia. Not as much as UAE, but definitely it has attacked Saudi Arabia, and it did attack Saudi Arabia in 2019 also. But nevertheless, the Saudis are reaching out. They are reaching out to Pakistan. They're building a so-called Sunni NATO kind of thing with Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan. They are also reaching out to China. So they are diversifying in their efforts to find security partners. You saw that with UAE reaching out to India, and in a few weeks, a couple of weeks, I think, Prime Minister Modi is also going to visit UAE. First he visited Israel, now he's going to visit UAE. So UAE also has a diversity of partners. It is part of the Abrahamic Accords. In fact, I would say the leading state in Abrahamic Accords. And then it is also part of I2U2, which is Israel, India, US, and UAE. And because of the divergence between India and the United States, at the moment, I2U2 seems to have become quite dormant. But nevertheless, you can see that the countries are moving differently. Oman seems to have developed a good partnership with Iran, to the extent that Iran says that if it collects tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, it plans to share it with Oman. And the Qataris too have repeatedly signaled that they would like the United States to leave, but there are reports that the U.S. is rebuilding the base in Qatar. So I don't know what the what's going on with Qatar, even though there are reports that perhaps they will ask the Americans to shut down that base, because the base, rather than protecting Qatar, has become a magnet for attacks from Iran. In fact, in the last few months, in spite of the presence of huge U.S. military, over 10,000 in Qatar, Qatar was attacked by two countries and the U.S. did nothing. The Israelis attacked Qatar, and then the Iranians attacked them massively, and the U.S. has done nothing to protect them. On the contrary, I think another development that is going to happen is that you will find now a strong military presence of Israel in the Gulf that was absent. I mean, there was a time when the Israelis could not fly over the Gulf. Joe Biden made a big deal of coming to Saudi Arabia and saying the only reason why I'm going to Saudi Arabia is to request overflight rights for Israelis to fly over Saudi Arabia. But now, as there are media reports that the Israelis have actually sent military assets to defend UAE from Iranian attacks, we now see that UAE, I don't know whether that presence, Israeli military presence in UAE, is going to be temporary or long-term, but right now you could say that Israel has a base in the Gulf, and that is UAE. It has military presence. Yes, they are defensive at the moment. I think it has some part of its Iron Dome there protecting UAE and Dubai and Abu Dhabi from attacks from Iran. But that Iron Dome is a military infrastructure run by the Israelis in UAE. That is the definition of a military base. So what is going to possibly emerge if Iran survives this and has some control on the Strait of Hormuz? I think there will be more fragmentation, more panic among the Gulf countries. And under Donald Trump, the U.S. will not care what the long-term implications are, or they will do whatever the Israelis dictate. I mean, by now it has become pretty obvious that we are looking at Donald Trump as an Israel-first president. He can say whatever he likes, but his actions are more Israel-first than America-first. So yes, while the Israeli, plus on top of that, this war has also reduced the aura of American military power. All the talk under the sun, it's unbelievable how much big talk both Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump indulged in, and in the net result seems to be that we are looking for a ceasefire with a more powerful Iran emerging out of this military. The regime, there seems to be no change possible in the regime. In fact, the regime has become more hardened and more hostile than before. So we are looking at a military failure by the United States, and that is very clear. At least for the Gulf countries, U.S. military presence did not protect them at all. They have suffered significantly at the hands of Iran. They might suffer more if there is more military action in the region. But I think the presence of Israel will increase significantly. I think you will see a greater presence of India in UAE in matters of defense. I'm not very sure that Indians will put troops out there, but there will be a lot of chatter about defense and talk. The current foreign policy of Prime Minister Modi is very good at talking big with a lot of acronyms, and so there will be a lot of acronyms about strategic, comprehensive partnership and this and that and that. In the end, it will always be UAE spending some money in India, investing money in India. Or some training programs by US, Indian military, or some exercises with US Navy in the Persian Gulf. That is if the Iranians allow the Indian Navy to come in to do exercises with the UAE. I think that would be unlikely. But I think you will see more enhanced Israeli intelligence is probably already all over the place, but Israeli military presence will be quite up there in that. I would consider UAE now as a functional Israeli military base at the moment, without any doubt. So that is one big, shall we say, victory for Israel, and a big loss for Saudi Arabia and Egypt and most of the Arab countries who really have. It's amazing as to how much the Arabs talk about Arab unity and Arab cohesion and Arab League and that, and their inability to act as one is startling. The more they talk about Arab unity, the less they act in a unified fashion. And I think their rivals and major powers who can exploit them have sensed it, that there is no correspondence between the rhetoric from Arab states and their actions. So all of them just cause enough trouble to attract benefits for themselves, either like in terms of foreign aid from the US or some concessions. I was listening to a discussion by experts who study the region all the time, and one of the points that they were trying to make was that one of the questions that UAE really needs to ask is, what has it gained from Abrahamic Accords? There was a lot of chatter about UAE getting F-35s. It didn't get them. And of course, the US really did nothing much to protect UAE from Iran. In fact, the United States attacked Iran without much consultation, to a great extent against the wishes of the countries in the region who knew that they would be the target of Iranian retaliation. So it was very clear that the US and Israel didn't care if these countries, so they were used as human shields, so to speak. So instead of Iran shooting all its missiles at Israel and US ships which are within its range, in many ways, Americans and Israelis diversified the targets for Iran's retaliation. So instead of Israel and US assets and Israel being the sole targets of the thousands of missiles and drones that Iran seems to possess, they shared it with the Gulf countries who took like in the excess of 2,000 missiles and drones. Many of them were blocked, but Iran has learned to play the saturation game very well, and so has done significant damage. Not only that, it has also done damage to the economic model of the Gulf. There is, I think, on tourism alone, the Gulf countries are losing over $500 million a day in this war. The cost of the infrastructure damage in terms of time and money is pretty high. It might take several months or maybe a year or two for them to rebuild after the attacks from Iran. That is assuming that the war has ended. And finally, I think that the role of other countries in the region has increased. Until now, it was mostly the United States that dominated the region, but now we can see an enhanced role that China is playing, and an enhanced role that India and Pakistan are playing, an enhanced role that Israel is playing in the region. And so Russia, China, India, Pakistan, Israel are now including Turkey, are now bigger players in the region than they were before this war. And of course, Iran is definitely has a bigger footprint on the Persian Gulf and the Persian security than before. So we shall see. I mean, the key issue really is whether this war just fizzles out or the war ends with an agreement between the United States and Iran, and an agreement which lists sanctions over Iran. My advice to Iran is to take the deal, dump its nuclear program, give up uranium enrichment in exchange for, I mean, this is what the Iranians should say. Okay, look, we will stop enrichment for 2 years, lift all economic sanctions now, and let Iran integrate into the global economy. And after 2 years or 3 years, when it has fully integrated into the economy and the US and other countries have very strong disincentives to restore those sanctions, then it can say, okay, now that you have been good and I can trust the West to fulfill its promises, unlike in the past when they did the JCPOA and the US reneged on it. Now that the West is reliable after 3 years of lifting sanctions, we will give you the enriched uranium that we have right now, which is under lock and key with the Russians. Here is the passcode, go take that. So I think that would be the best price of a deal. The Iranians probably will not accept that because their pride and their whole, I think it's quite rubbish to make this claim that this is about our sovereignty. Because they fought a war with the West. Two wars, so to speak, in the last 1 year. There was no use of nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are pretty useless. In fact, Iran probably can build conventional weapons with all the money that it will get from being integrated into the global economy. And not only that, but transfers of technology, etc. So it can have a very robust air force. For example, who knows, they could make a deal with Donald Trump to buy F-35s or upgrade the F-5s that they have to F-16s, whatever. So they could have a very robust investment in conventional weapons and continue to dominate the region without giving America this compulsion to go and attack Iran by saying, because the Americans think that just saying that we will not allow a nuclear Iran is enough to fool the American citizens so that they can take this particular action. And then they won't have that justification. So I don't know how the war really ends, but I think that in pursuit of strategic autonomy, United Arab Emirates may have committed a strategic blunder. It's not going to make the Gulf safe, and it's not going to make UAE a major power if you become essentially an Israeli military base. Going forward, I'm not very sure that that enhances UAE's geopolitical stature in any way. So I think it is a strategic blunder, and it may regret it. And unnecessary competition now with Qatar and and Saudi Arabia for sure, and Iran. So UAE is now going to be competing with 3 of its neighbors in a much more intense way than it did before. So anyway, those are the points that I wanted to make about this. So thank you for watching Conversations. Please subscribe to the channel, like this video, press the bell icon, and don't forget to share this video with your socio-political network. Until next time, I'm your host Muqtada Khan. Take care.